Hi everyone, thanks for tuning this episode of Nick Egan Times. On this episode, we have an incredible and legendary guest. We have the multi-talented Pepe Willie. Pepe is a producer, songwriter, musician, mentor, and consultant. Fun fact, Pepe was Prince's first producer. Welcome, Pepe, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for the invite, Nick. I really appreciate you, especially coming from all the way from Sydney, Australia.
Thanks, my friend. How's it all been going over there?
Well, everything's going pretty good. The weather's kind of changing. I'm in Nevada right now, and I try to spend my winters here in Nevada because it's warmer than in Minnesota. And Monday and Tuesday, it was 70, 74 degrees. Wednesday, Thursday, and today is like in the 50s,
Wow.
so a little chilly.
Yeah, summer's coming though. It's nearly March.
Oh yeah, but I leave in May because Nevada gets too hot,
Yeah.
and I suspect that in Australia the weather gets really hot there as well.
No, it gets cold. We're heading in a couple, like in 1 week, it'll be our autumn here, so it'll start to get
Oh,
cold. So we're the opposite to you. So when it starts to get hot, we get cold. It's hot now, and it'll start to get cold.
all right, all right. Well,
But
enjoy it while you can.
but that also depends on to geographically where you are in Australia. Some parts are always throughout the year really warm because the further you get up north, the closer you are to the tropics and stuff, and that's always hot. But when you come down to Sydney, it's like, I guess, cooler.
Okay, all right, yeah, awesome.
How has life, I guess, for you personally and professionally, and how did you deal with COVID when it came through and the pandemic?
Well, I was in Nevada when COVID hit, and I had a friend of mine from France come in and visit me, and she couldn't leave, you know, she just couldn't leave until the summer, and it was
Wow.
very difficult, but we got through it. I didn't catch COVID during that time, but last year in August, I had caught COVID.
Wow. Wow.
But it was very mild and it wasn't that bad. I went rushed myself to the hospital and they said, "You got COVID," and they gave me all of these medicines and stuff. So I stayed in the house for like 10 days taking all these medicines and I felt very well. My immune system is very strong.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful. All right. Let's jump straight into it. Tell me about growing up. I believe you grew up in New York. Your background, your family, and what that was like.
Well, growing up in Brooklyn, New York was very difficult. You know, I lived with my father. I never seen my mother and father together as a couple because they were separated or divorced or what have you. And there were like gangs and things like that in Brooklyn. I grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, they call it Bed-Stuy, do or die. That's what it was. So in order to survive, you had to be in the gang. You had to, and it was, I thank God that I made it out because there's a lot of people that I knew who I grew up with who just didn't make it. They got shot or stabbed, it was just unbelievable. But what pulled me out was my mother's brother, Clarence Collins. He was a member of Little Anthony and the Imperials. And they had a #1 record in 1958 called Tears on My Pillow. And he was 17 years old at the time, and I was 10. And he knew me as a little baby and growing up. But when I first recognized him, I was 10 years old, and I'm saying, wow, you sing with Little Anthony and the Imperials because you hear their songs on the radio and everything. And he was 17, so he was a smart ass. Yeah, I sing with Little Anthony and the Imperials.
Yeah.
And I thought that that was awesome. And when I was in school, you know, I attended public school, and I would hear his music on the radio at the candy store when we got out of school. And I hear his song on the radio as the store is playing it. And I went like, oh, wow. I said, that's my uncle, you know, and people did not believe it. You know, they did not believe it. And they chased me all the way home because
Oh,
they thought I was lying. And so I knew not to say that anymore. And I didn't say that anymore. But 5 years later, after that, when I was 15 years old, I got very close to my uncle and his group, Little Anthony and Imperials. And he had a rock and roll show that Murray the K had given at the Brooklyn Paramount Theater. And all these acts was on the show. And I wanted to hang out with my uncle. My mother said it was okay because it was family. And so I went with him, and I'm backstage with all of these stars and everything. And I'm in the Imperials dressing room. And my uncle looked at me and he says, Pepe, he says, why don't you go and knock on some of these other stars' doors and see if they want anything from the store? You can, you know, make some money. And I didn't even think of it. He thought of it. And I went like, oh, wow, this is amazing. So one of the first artists that I knocked on the door to get, you know, to find out if he wanted something was the great Chubby Checker,
oh wow.
Mr. Twist. And I was in shock. I knocked on his dressing room door. He says, yeah. He says, come on in. So I go in and I'm looking at this guy. I'm going like, this is Chubby Checker. I said, this is the guy that did the twist, man. And he goes, uh, yeah, I want something from the store, because I asked him, do you want anything from the store? He goes like, yeah. He says, go get me a pack of cigarettes, you know. So this is in the 60s, the early 60s,
All right.
you know, and I could go and get him cigarettes. So he gave me money. He wanted a pack of Salem cigarettes. So I go out the stage door, you know, open the door, the guard let me out, and they had a police line there. And this is the first time I found out about fans and groupies. I had no idea what they were all about. And every time that door opened, all of these people would scream, ah, because they thought that, you know, a star was coming out. And it was just me. So I'd come out and I go to the store and I get Chubby Checker these cigarettes. So I come back and I knock on the door, and the guard opens the door, you know, to let me in. And somebody from the group who was behind the police barrier said, hey, how come this guy can go in and out whenever he wants to? And me, like an idiot, said, oh, I just went to the store for Chubby Checker, and I'm holding up these cigarettes to get him a pack of Salem cigarettes. That was the last that I heard. They knocked down the barrier. They, you know, came charging after me. They're trying to get these cigarettes. I mean, the guard had to pull me in the door. My shirt was all ripped off and everything. And that was the first time that I found out about groupies, fans, and everything. And so I learned my lesson then.
Wow. Wow. That's a very great story. All right.
Thank you.
Tell me about actually tell me about Prince, and then the journey with Prince, and then East 94. Tell me about all that era.
Okay. Well, my uncle's group, Little Anthony and Imperials, that following year after the Brooklyn Fox, they played at the Brooklyn Paramount. They played at the Brooklyn Fox Theater in Brooklyn. So they had all the Motown review there, you know, from Stevie Wonder, The Temptations, Mary Wells, the Four Tops, you know, Marvin Gaye, and then other acts like Patti LaBelle, Dionne Warwick, Mary Wells. I mean, they had everybody there. Jay and the Americans, the Righteous Brothers, everybody on the same show. And I'm there. Wow, this is amazing. So The next time the Imperials got a show was at the world famous Copacabana in New York City. They're world famous. And of course, I was there. I was a little older then, and I knew what to do as a valet, giving them towels and when they came off a stage so they can wipe the sweat off their face and hung up their clothes and everything. And so one of the group members, Sammy Strain, who later went to the OJs and sang with the OJs for, I think it was like 17 years. And Sammy came in, he was one of the Imperials. And after they finished their show at the Copa, he comes upstairs, I'm in the dressing room, and he says, "Hey, Pepe." And I go, "Yeah." He says, "Who's that girl out in the waiting room with the green eyes?" And, I'm going, in my brain, I'm going like, hey, these guys are getting all the girls. Now maybe I can get me a girl. So out of the blue, I just said, "Oh, that's my girlfriend." I didn't know her. I didn't see her. I never met her in my entire life. And then he goes, "Oh, okay." So I knew that he would leave her alone if he thought that that was my girlfriend. So now I had to go out in the waiting room and find this girl with the green eyes. So I'm out there. I go out in the waiting room. I'm looking around. The place is packed, and I find her. I see her, and I met her. I sat down and I said, "Oh, how you doing? What's your name?" She said, "Chantel." And I said, "Hey, my name is Pepe." I says, "So who are you here to see?" She says, "Well, I'm visiting my aunt Kalua I'm from Minnesota, Minneapolis." And I says, "Oh, really?" I said, "Well, your aunt is dating my uncle right now from the Imperials, and maybe you can hang out with us. Do you have any curfew?" She goes, "No, I don't have no curfew." I said, "Well, let's just hang out." She says, "Okay." And that was Prince's first cousin.
Wow.
It was just amazing. Now imagine, Nicholas, if Sammy came in the room and says, "Who's that girl out there with the green eyes?" And I says, "I don't know."
Would have changed your whole life.
It would have changed everything. It would have changed everything. So Chantel and I, we got together, we fell in love, we got married, and all this. And I knew a lot about the music industry then by hanging out with all of these stars. And so when she went back to Minnesota, she knew that I knew about the business. So I got drafted into the military and the army, and I got out in 1970. So instead of me going back home to New York and Brooklyn, I says, "I'm going to Minneapolis." So I go to Minneapolis to see her, and she takes me over her relative's house, and Prince is there. He was 12 years old.
Wow.
He was 12 years old. I thought he was 8 because he was so short. I thought he was 8 years old. And there was nothing that we talked about or anything like that. And I had 90 days to go back to New York to get my job with New York Telephone Company. So I left. I was there in Minnesota in December. So in March, I went back to New York, got my job with the New York Telephone Company. And I stayed there for, a few years. Chantel would come over from Minneapolis and visit me over her aunt's house, and I used to hang out there. And so now it's 1973. 1973, I get this phone call, and it's Prince, because his cousin had told him that, "Yeah, you got to talk to Pepe. Pepe knows everything about the business and all this." So he asked me these questions. He says, "Yeah, Pep," he says, "I want to know about publishing." And I said, "Well, it's kind of difficult for me to explain to you what publishing is in detail without being face to face." So I told him, I says, "I'll be in Minnesota real soon, and I'll come and I'll talk to you about it." He says, "Okay." So in 1974, I go to Minneapolis, And this is how it all started. Nicholas, this is crazy. And my wife, we were married then, Chantel and I. So my wife's father, my father-in-law, Eddie Mandeville, had a ski club. So he had a ski club and he had a party after the event. So I go to the ski party and everything, and this band was playing, which was Grand Central, which was Prince's band. So I'm sitting down, I'm enjoying myself, I'm having a good time. And this woman kept looking at me, and I'm going like, why is this lady keep looking at me? I couldn't get it through my brain. So I finally went over to her and I says, hi, how are you? She goes, I'm fine. I said, so who are you? She goes, I am LaVon. I'm a manager of the band. And I said, oh, wow. And she says, well, how do you like them? And I go, well, yeah, I think they're great. They're good, And then she said, would you want to work with them? And it just dawned on me, why did she pick me to work with them? Now, I didn't know, but somebody had told the band that this big time producer was coming in from New York to check them out. I didn't know it was me.
Right.
So I said, sure, I'd love to work with them. And then that's when I really started working with Grand Central and having rehearsals with them.
Wow, that's incredible. How did you know did you know that Prince was going to be who he was, like become a star? Did you know how talented he really was at that time?
Well, yeah, on one of the rehearsals, because I know he was playing guitar, and he went over to Linda Anderson, which is Andre's sister. Andre was playing bass, and Morris Day was the drummer. He was the drummer. Then we had William Hollywood, was playing percussion, congas. So he goes over to Linda and he goes, Linda, he says, this is what I want you to play. And he starts playing these chords on the keyboard. And I'm going like, well, wait a minute. This guy plays guitar and he plays keyboards. I said, okay, that's cool. So then he gets back, they play a little bit, then he stops and he goes like, Andre, let me hold your bass. Now, Andre disputes this, but this is the only way that I knew that Prince played multiple instruments, so I know it's the truth. He said, let me hold your bass. So he takes Andre's bass and he starts, this guy is thumping, he's playing the bass, and I'm going like, oh my God. I said, this guy plays guitar, he plays keyboards, and he plays bass. I said, wow. I said, that is awesome. And he was just 16 then. He was just 16 years old. So I had asked him, but it was in the summer. It was like maybe May, it wasn't quite his birthday yet. And I asked him, I said, have you ever been in a recording studio before? And he goes like, no, I never been in a studio. And I says, well, I want you to come with me to the studio and play some of my music for my group 94 East. And he has, oh, okay. Now I not only rehearsed the band, but I also taught them the business of music, of what I knew during the time. And I knew the business backwards and forwards. I knew the business very well. And so I took him down to the musicians union. I got him signed up with the union. And of course I had to pay everybody. I had to pay all my band members. There was Marcy and Volkstad, Christy Lazenberry, Wendell Thomas, Dale Alexander, and Pierre Lewis. And I had to pay all of these people, so I gave him a cassette with 5 songs that I wrote that was on a guitar, my acoustic guitar. And I said, learn these songs, find out what you want to play on it, and we'll be in the studio in a couple of weeks. He says, okay. So 2 weeks later, we go into Cookhouse Recording Studios, and We started playing. We counted it off. 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, started kicking. The first song. And then the second song, and then the third song, and then the fourth song, and then the fifth song that's known as the Cookhouse Five, because those are the first time that Prince was ever in a recording studio.
Wow. Wow. Amazing.
It's amazing. It was just amazing.
Well, all right. Thank you for sharing that. That's really great. A great story and insights. What has been the best memories off the top of your memory that really stand out for you in your career? So something that just is like one of those moments that you look back and just go, wow, that happened.
Well, I think it's probably the best is just coming to Minnesota and working with Grand Central. And there was a lot of other talent going on, in Minnesota. And I would call up New York, my friends in Brooklyn, and they were going like, "Hey man, you ever coming back to to Brooklyn?" And I was going like, "Dude," I said, "this is a new Motown here." That's what I told them. I said, they got talented musicians here. And then my friend said, "Hey, are there any black people in Minnesota, Minneapolis?" And I was going like, "Yeah." I said, "I'm here." And they have, it's people, they got music going on, but they don't know the business. They don't know what's going on. They don't, they just don't know. And I'm here and I've started teaching these guys, and not only Prince, but we had Rocky Robbins, we had Ricky Peterson, who later on, I think a couple of years ago, he played with Fleetwood Mac, Pierre Lewis, who's now with the Commodores, Dale, who was my keyboard player, and Dale Alexander, our drummer. He was 16 years old and playing phenomenal. And he worked on Madhouse with Prince. He did the Madhouse thing. So I stayed there, and I remember you asked me before, did I know that Prince was going to be as huge as he has gotten? And no, I didn't. And anybody who says that they knew, they, come on, what
Yeah.
are they, psychic or something? They don't know. All I wanted for Prince is for him to have a career in the music business. And I set it up for him to have a career. And all he had to do was work. I remember him asking me one time, there was a song playing on the radio, and I can't remember the name of the song, but he was going like, "Man," he said, "I'm so tired of that song. I hear it all the time." And I looked at him, I said, "Prince," I said, "you wish that that was your song." I said, "because every single time it's played, the writer, the publisher is getting paid. So if they play it 1,000 times, you're making money. 500,000 times, you're making money, So when he got signed with Warner Brothers, I started his publishing company for him. I said, the first thing they're going to ask you is, do you have a publisher? I said, when they ask you that, you tell them, yes, I do. I said, because those are your rights, you can write the music, but not necessarily own it.
Right.
If you are a publisher and you wrote it and you're the publisher, you own that music. So first slice of the pie of that money you get, and they can't take it from you. They can't recoup for money that they spent on you on promotions and marketing. They can't take that from you to pay for that. That's your money. And I started all that stuff for them and stuff. So that was my memorable moment of staying in Minneapolis. I made that decision to stay in Minneapolis. I wasn't leaving, despite how cool it was.
That's incredible. I've actually been to Minneapolis too, so I know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, you've been there in the winter, huh?
No, I came in the summer. I've got a
Oh, the
cousin.
summer's okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
went to Duluth as well on the outskirts.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, June
absolutely.
Belief. Yeah, it's nice out there in the
It
countries.
is. You know, it's so beautiful out there, Nicholas. It's like the summer, the spring, the fall is beautiful. But you can't put your head around how cold it gets.
I know.
And it always catch you off guard. You know, you know, you do the spring, the summer, the fall, then all of a sudden, boom, winter hits, and you're like, oh my God, it's so cold. You know, it's just unbelievable, unbelievable cold. You know, but
All
yeah,
right.
I'll tell you this story. Unless you have a question, I'll
No,
answer
no, go
anyway.
go. Tell me a story. I'd like to hear it.
Um, when Prince got, I used to be signed to my group 94 East. We took those songs that Prince recorded with us, and I went to New York and Pound the Pavement, and finally got signed with Polydor, a major record label, under the tutelage of Hank Cosby. Now, Hank Cosby produced and co-wrote My Sharia Moore for Stevie Wonder and for Once in My Life. So now I'm co-producing with this big time producer, you know.
Wow.
And so later on, we got dropped from Polydor. And Bobby Z, who was Prince's drummer, he was my drummer before he even knew who Prince was. He didn't even know who Prince was. And so he was my drummer. So we got dropped, and Prince got signed to Warner Brothers. So when Prince got signed to Warner Brothers, I was saying in my brain, I was going like, well, what happened to us, I didn't want to happen to him. And that's why I stayed really close to him and made sure that his business and all things was together. So uh, they were rehearsing at Dale's Tire Mart, Tire Mart in Minneapolis. And I don't know if Prince left the door open or somebody actually broke in, but they stole all of his equipment. You know, I mean, everything except for two speakers that I lent him, which were huge, and you would have to have two big trucks to put those speakers in because they were huge. And so he got robbed of that. And when I found out about that, I was so upset. And I said, okay, Prince, I said, you're coming to my house. You're going to come to my house. Ain't nobody coming in there, you know. And so the whole band, the Revolution, rehearsed and practiced at my house for 6 months. And he auditioned Gail Chapman, who was this girl keyboard player, Matt Fink, Bobby Z, Andre Simone, and Des Dickerson. So they all, you know, practiced at my house for 6 months, 12 hours a day, from 10 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, they rehearsed. So one evening, after they finished, I had to go to Prince's house to tell him something. And I didn't have, I can't remember what I wanted to tell him, but I had to tell him something. So I go over his house. I see his car outside. I'm knocking on the door. I'm ringing the bell, and he wouldn't answer. And I know he's in there. So I knocked a little harder. I rang the bell some more. He wouldn't answer. I went, dang, man, where's this guy? Is he asleep after 12 hours of practice? So I heard this tapping, you know, just a little tapping. And I was going, where's that coming from? So I go around to the side of the house and I look down in the basement window. Prince was down in the basement playing drums.
Wow. Wow.
After 12 hours of practice. I mean, it just blew my mind, you know? So I had to bang on the window in between the beats. And then he looked up and I said, man, open the door. Then he comes to the door and I told him whatever I had to tell him and stuff. And then I left. But that amazed me. And what happened then, I had said to myself, I said, Pepe, you know, I said, you could practice 12 hours a day and you can be real. I said, this is what it takes to be really good. And I says, I'm going to do it. So I grabbed my guitar one day and I started playing. I says, okay. And I started studying and doing the scales and all this stuff. I got to like 4 hours, Nicholas, and I said, I can't do it. I said, this is as far as I could go. I can't go any further, you know? So, how could, the drive that he had was just, it was just amazing. I've never seen any artist from the time that, I started meeting artists at 15 work so hard. Now, they said that James Brown was the hardest working man in show business. No, no, no. Prince. Prince was the hardest working artist in the business. And he never stopped. He called people up 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I mean, he called me up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and goes, Pepe, I got to go back in the studio. And this is the first time he's in the studio, the very first time. He calls me up because we're listening to the tapes. He goes, I got to go back. I said, Prince, do you know what time it is? He said, yeah, man, but I had to call you. I got to go back in. I said, for what? I said, what you were playing was phenomenal. I said, me and Wendell Thomas, the bass player, I said, we were talking for hours on the phone about what you contributed to those songs. He says, no, I got to go back in. So the next day I was playing golf, already made, tea time for golf and everything. So I had to call the studio and said, Prince wants to come in there to do something. I don't know what he wants, but let him in. Now, by what he had played on this first time in the studio, I was totally confident that he could go in by himself and do what he wanted to do. So this is the second time he goes in the studio, and he changes something on "If You See Me," the song, and he did it. So I didn't even hear it, but I didn't hear it. But by the way, my book, I don't know, did you hear my book? Did you see my book?
Yeah.
This is, If You See Me, because it's named after the song that Prince was first in the recording studio, written by myself and Tony Keeney. Now, Prince recorded that song, but he called it Do Yourself a Favor. And it's on his 1999 deluxe album. It was in his vault. Wow. And Warner Bros. Finally released it in 2019. It's the same song, but it just has 2 different titles, which was amazing. And I remember, because me and Morris Day used to hang out a lot, because we all had the same friends in Minneapolis. And we were going to Minneapolis, Morris and I, and we ran into Prince. And Prince was, he was good at what he did, but he was kind of a square. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he didn't do anything. And we were smoking marijuana, we doing all kinds of stuff. Right. So me and Morris, we go to Minneapolis to get some more marijuana, and we run into Prince. And I was in Morris's car, and Morris sees Prince, and he goes, there's Prince, man. I go like, where? He goes, he's over there. And we look over there, and we go like, oh, man. Because we don't want to run into him. So Prince comes running over to the car, and he goes, hey, man. He said, what are you guys doing? And we go, oh, nothing, like that, Then he goes, here. And he hands his cassette to me, and I give it to Morris. He says, check this out. We put it in the cassette player in the car, and it was If You See Me. It was my song.
Wow.
And I was going like, wow. I said, man, this is awesome. He says, I'm going to put it out on one of my albums, man. I said, oh, man, Prince, that's awesome. Thanks, man. But he never put it out, right? So now it's in the 80s and stuff. And now I want to do my own album because Prince was stable. He was stable. And so I met a friend of mine, Jeffrey Pinkin, who started this label, and he paid me to do my own album. and that was Minneapolis Genius. And I worked with Tony Sylvester. Tony Sylvester was a member of the Main Ingredient with Cuba Gooden Sr., who was the lead singer. And the Main Ingredient had all kind of hits. And for me to work with Tony, it was just unbelievable. And I learned a lot from him as well. And so I'm in New York. I'm talking to Teddy Randazzo. Teddy Randazzo wrote, I'm on the outside looking in, going out of my head, hurt so bad, take me back for Little Anthony and the Imperials, which were big hits for them. And Teddy was a good friend. He helped me with my writing. And he went with me to Polydor when I got signed because he said, "You want?" I said, "Teddy, I'm going to, I got a meeting with Polydor." He said, "You want me to go with you?" And I go like, "Oh, wow." I mean, that was amazing to me, you know? And so he went with me, and that's how we got signed to Polydor at the time. So it was just amazing how all of these things just came into play just by me saying, "Oh man, that's my girlfriend."
That's you know they're incredible stories that you've told, and you know it's truly amazing your career. Pepe, thanks for coming on the podcast. I do appreciate
Yeah.
it. Sorry, you know it's amazing, and I wish you all the best in the future and everything you're doing.
Hey, Nicholas, I appreciate the invite. Thank you so much. You know, it was amazing. And I love telling these stories because it's part of history,
It is,
you know,
definitely.
and it has to be out there. It has to get out, you know. So thank you so much. God bless you, brother.
God bless
You
you
know.
too, brother. Too welcome to and yeah, thanks for coming on. I'm just sincerely appreciative. Thank you.
All right, all right. Peace, baby.
See you, my friend. See ya.
All right, bye-bye.